Hello, welcome to Legislative Report. I'm State Representative Kate Harper, the 61st District in Montgomery County. Since I began serving as your representative in 2001, I've been an advocate for improving transportation. About 36% of Pennsylvania's massive highway system is considered to be in poor or mediocre condition. Pennsylvania leads the nation in structurally deficient bridges. Congestion abounds, especially in areas like ours, where the roads were not designed to handle the amount of cars and trucks crossing them daily. The effects in vehicle operating costs, road delays, and crashes are estimated to cost $9 billion a year. I've done my best to keep you informed about these issues throughout the years, and today I'm thankful I can finally say we are doing something about it. Joining me today is Pennsylvania Secretary of Transportation Barry Schoch. Secretary Schoch was a guest on the program last spring when we discussed the proposed transportation funding plan that is now law. Secretary Schoch, thank you for joining me on the program.
Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Well, what I wanted to talk about first, because viewers always want to know this, is how did you get to be Secretary of Transportation and what's your background?
Well, I'm an engineer. I graduated college with a civil engineering degree from Penn State. And I've been working in consulting engineering primarily in my career, the private sector, doing only transportation work, working up and down the East Coast, serving on transportation boards both at the state and federal level relative to finance and evaluation of transportation systems, designing highways and bridges, and doing all the associated work that yields in the end improved highways and transportation systems around the country. From there, frankly, as the administration changed, I got approached to see whether I have interest or not. And my dad was a history teacher, and I read a lot about what I think the founding fathers intended, which is for people to come in, bring their expertise and serve, and then go back to their field. And presented the opportunity. I felt I spent my whole career working in Pennsylvania. I was born in Pennsylvania, graduated high school and college here. I care about the Commonwealth, and opportunity to offer my 30 years of experience to the Commonwealth was something I couldn't really refuse. So that's how it happened.
So here you are, and you actually took over the reins in the Transportation Department at a time when we needed funding, and you were a big advocate of that. Why do you think we needed to pass a transportation package?
Well, for me, it comes back to the engineering science of what we have here. And, all the dialogue, and I appreciate your support and interest in this, because without it, it wouldn't have happened. But I think where we start with the engineering science is we own 40,000 miles of road and 25,000 bridges. That's the state system. There's another 77,000.
25,000 bridges.
25,000. And there's another 77,000 miles of local road. And we've been underinvesting in this for a long time. And when I was in the private sector, I was the president of the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, which is a advocacy group that independently looks at the system and sort of evaluates it. Our estimates were that we were underinvesting by about $3 to $3.5 billion a year, every year. Not a one-time shot, but that's how far behind we were taking care of the system. What that resulted in was an aging system, one where we weren't able to add capacity. In your introductory remarks, you talked about congestion in Philadelphia. When's the last time we added lanes to these major highways? We haven't even been able to rebuild them. And on the bridge side, we lead the nation in structurally deficient bridges. Of the 25,000 bridges we have, 14,000 of them are what we call weak, meaning they've aged to the point where they can take an 80,000-pound legal load and not a pound more. And I know most drivers don't think about that, but I can tell you that the haulers who have to try to get an overweight vehicle through this state are very frustrated because it's difficult. You're not allowed to take it on the interstates, and our secondary system, meaning our traffic routes, can't handle those oversized roads. Even in Hurricane Sandy, New Jersey was trying to get out 100,000-pound trucks to get that trash and debris out of the state as quickly as possible. Very understandable. We had to tell them they couldn't use I-78 because bridges on I-78 couldn't take anything over 80,000 pounds. So to me, the reason I was advocating for it was, one, it's a public safety issue. Two, it's an economic issue. Whether you're the one being forced to drive around these weight-restricted bridges or not, we're all paying for it. If it costs more to get the farm product to market because they're driving around weight-restricted bridges, that shows up in the price. If companies are thinking about locating in Pennsylvania, they're interested in what's the state of our infrastructure. In Philadelphia, is SEPTA going to continue to operate? Is it going to improve, or is it going to have service cuts? On rural Pennsylvania, what's the condition of the roads and bridges? So safety, economic competitiveness, and then just purely, no different than us, these materials do not get better with age. So steel, concrete, bituminous material, you have to invest in it, you have to repair it, and eventually replace it. It won't get better on its own. So for all those reasons, economic reasons, pure public safety reasons, and the engineering science, I felt if we didn't deal with this, it wasn't going to go away, and it wasn't going to get any cheaper. So for the children of the state, we collectively, you, the legislature, the governor, we just solved a problem rather than passing it on to them.
Well, I have to say that I was surprised to see that business, industry, farming, and lots of other groups were all in favor of essentially lifting the cap on the wholesale gas tax and allowing that to rise. And that's a surprise to me as a legislator. It's rare that all those groups are lined up in favor of something that would maybe raise prices at the pump. So why do you think that's so?
Well, look, if you're in business, and again, I spent 28 years of my career running companies, and you look at the cost of a decision, the cost of no action, the cost of a decision. What business was looking at was saying, if we do nothing, what's the cost to us? Meaning the cost to drive around weight-restricted bridges, the wear and tear in our vehicles, because these companies keep track of the repairs they make to their vehicles based on the condition of the roads. And as they were all evaluating it, they thought it was very clear that the cost of investment was a lot lower than the cost of non-investment. So they were coming to you saying, we support this because it's important to reduce our overall costs. And I think that's a pure business analysis of saying, if we do nothing, what's the cost? If we take action, what's the cost? And clearly, in their mind, the cost of taking action was less and did not have the negative effects of not taking action. That's why you saw such a wide diversity of groups supporting this, including every chamber of commerce in the Commonwealth.
Which was surprising, and I've had constituents say to me, well, businesses are going to leave because the price of gas is so high, but the opposite's actually true.
It's exactly the opposite. If we don't invest in the infrastructure and take care of it, they'll leave. And we lost a company last spring when Virginia passed their transportation bill. Maryland passed a transportation bill. Companies that look at mid-Atlantic states, they'll look at the same states, they'll look at us, look at Maryland, look at Virginia. We lost a dairy company to Virginia, a dairy company. We are the top dairy producing state in the nation. And a company went to Virginia because their bridges are in better condition and they could have hauled heavier loads.
And I guess milk's heavy when you're hauling it around.
They're no different than anyone else who want to haul as much as they can. And for our dairy farmers, we're actually at a competitive disadvantage to New York right now because they allow heavier loads on their bridges in New York. We don't. We're trying to get there, and we're working with the ag industry with the new revenue to create agri-access networks where we actually can up the weight restrictions, lift and actually increase the load carrying capacity of bridges to make them.
You have to make sure the bridge can safely handle the heavier
load. And that takes money. You've got to invest in it. You've got to strengthen it.
Right.
But we're going to do that. We owe it to our dairy industry.
Now, I know there were some people who weren't a fan of giving more money to SEPTA, but you were also very supportive of mass transit generally, and most of it went to SEPTA or will be going to SEPTA. Why is that? Why do you think mass transit is important?
Well, public transportation is important for a lot of reasons. First of all, not everybody doesn't have a car, and a lot of people can only get to and from work with public transportation. And we have public transportation in every county. And SEPTA, I know in your region is obviously huge, but there's public transportation in every county of Pennsylvania.
Even places where my colleagues have said they've never seen a public bus?
Yeah, there's public transportation that takes seniors. We have rides that take seniors. There's shared ride services. There's public transportation everywhere. But in our urban areas, without question, let's think about what Philadelphia would look like if SEPTA didn't exist. I mean, we know how congested our roadways are down there now.
Oh, we know what happens if they go on strike, God forbid.
The congestion would be unbelievable. For a lot of our downtown employers, that's how people get to work. And it's true in other urban areas like Pittsburgh, even here in Harrisburg. We have a lot of employees that get to and from work with mass transportation. It's a key component of the system. Just like pedestrian facilities, bike facilities, you've heard me talk about all of them. To me, they're all equally important. And some areas of the state might look at it and say, gee, I don't benefit from public transportation, but they do, whether it's seniors or, again, disabled persons. But what they do benefit from is that in our urban areas, which is where we need a healthy economy, public transportation is a huge component of that. And we export dollars from our urban areas, from transportation to our rural areas. It's Commonwealth. We should do that. We support our rural roads with revenues raised in our urban areas.
Sure.
But if we don't have an adequate mass transit system, then the overall economy in our urban areas is going to suffer. And that will hurt rural Pennsylvania.
Because it won't be able to produce the tax revenues it's producing.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about another complaint I've heard. Some people said, okay, fine, you're going to raise gas taxes. How do I know that money's actually going to roads and bridges? And how do I know that money that's raised in southeastern Pennsylvania, where there are an awful lot of cars and an awful lot of gas taxes, is coming back here? How do I know that?
Well, first of all, it can only be spent from constitutionally restricted accounts, and this one is a constitutionally restricted account. The money that goes into our transportation trust fund can only be used for highway projects. So
Can't
when
be
we talk-
diverted to anything else?
Can't be diverted to the general fund, cannot. It can only be used for highway-related
Okay.
functions. So for everybody watching this, any penny that goes into the gas tax that goes back to us can only be used for highway purposes by constitutional law, period. Secondly, in terms of the dollars that get raised in a region, we move money around the state. I won't say we don't, because it's Commonwealth, and clearly there is, where our gas taxes, registration fees, et cetera, the bulk of that is raised in our urban areas, and yet it's important for farm products to get to Philadelphia. It's important for other things
Absolutely.
manufactured to get to Philadelphia, so we have to support the whole network. But the majority of the dollars that are coming out of Philadelphia are going to stay there. Some of them
Philadelphia region.
Philadelphia region, not Philadelphia County, but the 5-county region in Philly. And the Philadelphia region, District 6, carries over 20% of our program statewide. When I look at the program, we got 11 districts, and you just do the math, you'd think the average would be about 10%, while they're carrying 20%. So clearly the Philadelphia region is a big investment target for us. And as you said,
Its fair share of the money.
absolutely. And SEPTA gets about 65%, 60% of, it's $500 million by year 5 for public transportation. $300 million of that will be going to SEPTA.
Right.
So clearly, SEPTA has a heavy weight of the percentage of funding we spend on public transportation.
Well, I think we've done pretty well. I mean, after the last gas tax increase in 1997, there was a reconstruction of Route 309, which took 10 years, but which is, other than the potholes, a beautiful road. We'll talk about the potholes. And we also got the section of Route 202 finished, the new section,
Right.
brand new road between Route 63 in my district all the way to Doylestown. So we've had some significant investment, but I do know people are worried that 202 is illogical the way it currently is. Wide, small, it's ridiculous. They
It is
keep saying to
illogical.
me, who would plan it that way? I'm like, well, we didn't plan it that way, but we are working on it.
Yeah, and it's that project will get accelerated because of this funding now. So the 202 corridor is clearly one that's a focus for us. We realize that that's a congestion and safety problem, and it's a target for investment for us.
Well, and that's because even though many people use SEPTA, I have read that 95% of our commuters can't, because they commute from one suburb to another suburb. They don't go in and out of the city, although commuting out of the city to the burbs has increased. In general, most people don't do that commute. They commute from one suburb to another.
And that is true. That's what's changed about the travel patterns down around Philadelphia. I mean, if you go back to when SEPTA was built, and a lot of the lines were built, and back to really, if you want to go back to when we were more of a manufacturing-based area, the downtown business area is where everybody went. So you had sort of spokes going in, and everybody's
Right.
going in and out. Now, as you drive around suburban Philadelphia and a lot of our suburban areas, it's a lot of business in the suburban areas. So as you say, people are traveling back and forth around the city, not in and out of the city. So long term, that's something we're going to have to look at, about thinking about SEPTA and the next generation of connecting the suburbs.
Well, that's a good place to take a break then. So we'll take a quick break. Legislative Report will return in just a moment. My guest is the Secretary of Transportation, Barry Schoch. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Did you know that the Pennsylvania Farm Show's history goes all the way back to 1851? Originally organized as a state fair by the Pennsylvania Agricultural Society, it was discontinued in 1899. It wasn't until 1916 that Charles Patton, the Pennsylvania Secretary of Agriculture, worked with others to develop a new agricultural fair which debuted in January 1917. It was in 1925 that the roots were laid for the farm show that we know today. The show had grown so large that 40,000 attendees were traveling to various sites all around Harrisburg. During this year, the Pennsylvania State Department of Agriculture took control of the event, and the legislature had decided to appropriate money that gave birth to the Farm Show complex. Finally, in 1931, the main exhibition building opened and welcomed 150,000 visitors to the show that year. Over the years, the farm show has continued to grow. Various events showcasing animals, products, and skills were added to the event. The farm show complex has also continued to grow, with more buildings and arenas being added over the years. The count stands at 24 acres inside 11 buildings and 3 arenas. Today, The show hosts approximately 6,000 animals, 10,000 competitive exhibits, and 300 commercial exhibits, along with over 500,000 visitors. Since the doors to the main exhibition building opened, the farm show has become the world's biggest indoor agricultural event. Now you know.
Did you know that on October 4th, 1911, the statues that greet visitors in front of the state capitol building in Harrisburg were dedicated to the citizens of the Commonwealth? In 1902, George Gray Bernard was commissioned to design the figures that embellish the front of the Capitol building. During the installation period, Bernard explained to the General Assembly what each sculpture symbolized. The Southern group, titled The Burden of Life, depicts the story of Adam and Eve followed by the fall of man in the forms of despair. The Northern group, titled Love and Labor, depicts male and female figures reaping fruits of labor and advances to a new Adam and Eve who gaze westward into the future. Recently, both sculptures underwent restoration to prevent further deterioration from their natural beauty. Now you know.
Welcome back to the program. Today I'm discussing transportation funding with my guest, Transportation Secretary Barry Schoch. Now, we've been talking about why we needed to pass a transportation funding bill. So what can my constituents and the people in Montgomery County expect now that we've gotten it passed? Where are we going to spend the money? What's going to happen there?
First of all, I'd say to everybody, go to our website and click on Decade of Investment. And you can see a website, and you can go right to Montgomery County, you can get Representative Harper's district, pull it up, and then you can click on every project and see, get a description of the project, what it's going to cost. The only thing you don't see yet is when we're going to do it. We're working on that right now.
Okay.
So our plan now is over the next month to prioritize the projects of what we can deliver this year. And as you know, this Act 89 builds the revenue over a 5-year period, meaning it's not here all year one. We don't have $2.4 billion year one. And that was by design, frankly. We don't have projects sitting on billions of dollars of projects sitting on the shelf.
Right.
So
Feel that shovel ready.
Right, yeah, we've got to get projects through the right-of-way design, utility relocation phases, and get them ready to go.
Environmental, if
Right.
you need it, that kind of thing.
So we're right now prioritizing. Let's talk about what would have happened had nothing occurred. If you had not passed the legislation statewide, we would have done about $1.5 billion of construction next year, one of the lowest totals in the last decade. Instead, we're going to do about $2.3 billion.
Okay.
So $800 million more statewide than we would have done had you not done
What
the
about
bill.
these bridges that we've been talking about?
That's where we'll focus on. The first year, obviously, we'll be focusing on the bridges, and I want to talk about our P3, Public-Private Partnership Program, so remind me to talk about that. But we're going to focus on bridges, intersection improvements, traffic signal improvements, because that creates a lot of congestion. The new traffic signal technology can move about 30% more vehicles than the old technology. So we're going to updating traffic equipment. We'll be improving intersections from a safety standpoint, doing a lot of paving and resurfacing work that we've been, frankly, putting off because our focus on bridges the last several years, we haven't been able to afford to do a lot of paving. So you'll see a lot of improvements to surface and roadways. Then what we'll be doing is starting the development, the design, environmental process, right-of-way process on the bigger projects like 202 that will take us a few years to get ready. Even if we had all the money in the world today, we don't have them ready to go. So we'll accelerate those compared to their old schedule. But we're in the process right now working through that. And if your constituents watch that Decade of Investment site, into the spring you'll see the commitments of what we're going to do this year.
You're going to update it?
We're going to update that and put schedules
dates on
when they're going to
it.
go.
Right, okay.
And then you'll also see as we work through the planning process when the bigger projects are going to go. So in years 1 and 2, what they can expect to see is a lot of work on bridges, a lot of resurfacing work, a lot of intersection improvement work, a lot of traffic signal upgrades. In years 3, 4, and 5, you'll start to see more of the bigger projects starting to come online.
The improvements.
Right, improvements to congestion. So those take us a few years to get ready. By year 5, when the full money is uncapped, the full realization of the revenue that was passed in Act 89 occurs, at that point you'll start to see the bigger projects under construction. So it's a ramp up of the program, but you can go to the website, get an idea of what we'll be doing, and then as we update the schedules, we'll tell you when we're going to deliver them. So that's where we're heading. Now the P3.
Well, hold on before you get to the P3s, and I promise that we will talk about what that is and what they do. I know somebody's sitting out there thinking of potholes. This winter has been brutal. And a freeze-thaw cycle is actually not good, although everybody would love it warmer. Talk to me about potholes. What are we doing about that?
Well, it has been a tough year. I think a couple weeks ago we had a low one day of -10 and then a high of 50 later in the week. That's just awful. I mean,
awful for a road.
It's
Good
great
for
for us.
people?
Well, yeah. Well, the 50 part was. I don't know about the 10 below, but the 50 part was good. But I'm certain everybody out there would like to see it be in the 30s and 40s. But that 30s in the day and 20 at night, where it freezes at night and then thaws in the day and freezes at night, thaws in the day, that combining of the heaving when it freezes and then the settling when it thaws and the water gets down to cracks and it freezes again, that's what creates potholes. And we live in one of the worst climates in the country for that type of situation. It's just the reality of where we are. So we'll be out patching, but it's cold patch. So the real repairs to that paving work can't start till the spring till we get warm weather.
So because the asphalt plants
Right,
can't make
asphalt
asphalt
plants.
till it's warm.
Right, and we can't lay it or pop right back out.
All right,
So
now I have my people are calling 1-800-FIX-ROADS.
keep doing that because that tells us where the problems are. We'll get out and do temporary patches now, and then we'll come back in the spring and do the permanent patches, and in some cases do a permanent overlay of some of these roads.
All right, great. Now let's talk about what is a P3. People don't know what that is unless they're engineers.
Yeah, well, even more so, even engineers, maybe it's more the finance people understand it, the bankers, but it's a public-private partnership. You all passed a law about 2 years ago,
Right.
gave it to us. New tool in the toolbox. What it allows is for the private sector to invest in transportation with us. So they can bring their own money to the table. They can propose projects that weren't in our pipeline. They can propose new revenue methods, and they can do that in what's called an unsolicited proposal, meaning if you and I had an idea and we were both in the private sector, we could send it to the P3 board and say, here's a project we think we could finance for you. And
Normally, would that mean that they would charge a toll? Like
Probably, if
they
they're
want
gonna
to put a new
finance it.
bridge up and
They wanna
then they'll
put-
charge a toll?
that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is what's called an availability payment, where they look at our revenue streams and say, instead of this taking 10 years for you to do it, we can do it in 3 years. We'll put the financing up, but you pay us back with your revenue. And that's what we're going to do with the bridge program. On the bridge side, I know you and I have talked about this, but we've been looking at bundling, meaning looking at bridges that are of similar size and type. And instead of allowing you to design a 48-foot bridge and me to design a 47-foot bridge, we're saying, you know what, they could both be 48 feet. And then we can save money on prefabricating elements, save money in design, save money in construction.
It also seems that rural PA would be a good opportunity zone for that type of a bundling.
That's what we did. We
process.
piloted it in 3 rural counties, and we found that we were saving about 30 to 40% in design and 20 to 30% in construction. So
Wow.
that's something we're going to, it's significant, and that's something we're going to go ahead with on a smaller scale on our regular program. But what we decided to do was we had interest from the private sector about doing a statewide program of bundling, if you will. So we went out with a solicited proposal and asked for companies to submit their qualifications to build 500 or 600 bridges for us statewide. And instead of it taking 8 to 10 years to replace those 500 or 600 bridges, we're going to require them to do it in 3 years. And then they're going to maintain them for the next 30 years.
To make
And
sure that they design them in a way that
They take the risk.
they work.
They're
Okay,
taking the
good.
risk. And in essence, we're going to do ground up total reconstructions. We're going to allow them to select the materials as long as it meets our material approval list. But they'll decide how they're going to be designed, how they're going to be built, and they'll take the risk then on the long-term maintenance. So if they choose to use a material that might not last so long, they'll be on the hook for the maintenance for 30 years.
So we won't be.
We won't be.
Which is good. I think this is sort of similar to very large school districts having one design for their schools,
Mm-hmm.
or Wawa having one
Right.
design for all of its stores, or something like
And then
that.
they
Is
fit
that
the
what we're
site.
talking about?
Similar concept, because every bridge, what we did is we went through and identified 1,000 bridges that were either single or double span that were similar in size and length, so that we kind of helped the private sector out by saying, here's a universe of 1,000 bridges that are fairly similar. Because you can't just say, here's a standard bridge and say, we're going to put 50-foot bridges everywhere.
Right,
But,
we're just gonna
you know,
drop it in
right,
place
right,
here and
yeah, which I
there,
think a
right.
lot of people think we should be able to do. But what we can do is, using this contract on a statewide basis, say we have 150 bridges that are 52 feet, or could be 52 feet, and we got another 100 bridges that could be 43 feet. You can decide that. We'll give you that latitude to make those decisions. Where you really save the money then is on the fabrication of the beams, because you're mass producing the
Sure.
same size beams, and other elements that can be prefabricated. Then you save a lot of time on construction because they're prefabricated and ready to go.
It's like
And-
buying 100 paper plates instead of 10.
Right.
It's cheaper.
It is. And when you go to install them, if the same contractors are installing them and basically putting the same bridge up in multiple locations, it'll be faster and less expensive. So we'll see. I mean, you know, this is something we're piloting with the P3 program, but it's getting a lot of national attention because it's other states are looking at it as a potential model, as is Act 89 getting a lot of
I
national
think the idea of
attention.
tying the maintenance to the design is very, very smart. I'll have to see how that works.
Well, it puts the risk on them. They can't select a material that won't last. So that's our hook. And then We have pre-prescribed maintenance specifications they're going to have to meet. And then at any point if they don't meet them, then we don't pay them. So there's a financial stake for them. So they'll put up the money, they'll put up the financing, they'll design and build them, and then they'll maintain them, and then we'll pay them back over this 30-year period for their initial investment. And that'll knock 600 bridges out in 3 years instead of taking maybe 8 years.
All right, I want to talk about one other thing, because I know you sit on the Turnpike Commission Board, also in your role as Secretary of Transportation. In the Philadelphia region, the Turnpike actually acts sort of as a beltway.
It does.
It does get those people from one suburb to another. Are they benefited at all by this transportation bill?
They are. They will get $85 million a year by year 5 out of the oil company franchise tax, and that is dedicated to the Monfayette projects in Pittsburgh, which they were assigned under a previous act of the legislature to build for the Commonwealth. And a portion of that can be used for what we call expansion on the main line, which is, in your region, slip ramps. Meaning, if we look at the Turnpike, and as you said, it's a beltway, one of the things we're doing uniquely, beyond the money they're getting, is we're now looking at the Turnpike as though it's part of our system. And, for some reason, we've never done that in the past.
Right. It was always its own separate entity.
And yet, if we can put additional ramps somewhere at the Turnpike that alleviates a problem for us that I have to spend money on in the PennDOT system, then we can contribute to that cost.
We ought to look at it as one system.
Right, absolutely.
It's different roads or different mass transit. In fact, I know you've recently visited Philadelphia region and you were at 611.
I was.
Every morning, because I listen naturally to the traffic reports, from 611 to Plymouth Meeting is basically a slow crawl.
It is.
And I know that Route 611 getting onto the Turnpike's also. So if you look at Route 611, which PennDOT owns, and the Turnpike, which the Turnpike Commission owns, I think there's some synergies there.
Absolutely, and that's what we were talking about. They wanted us to widen the bridge, and I said, well, maybe, but that might just move the problem a half mile down throughout 611 and might not change anything. So instead, what we're going to look at, Montgomery County, I give them credit, Montgomery County is looking at the Turnpike through the entire county saying, what would our priorities be for other access points to the Turnpike that would help distribute traffic better to and from the PennDOT system, the local system. We're going to work together. Craig Shuey, the Chief Operating Officer, was with me, as was Don Steele, a local engineer from the Philadelphia area. So Don, Craig Shuey and I were there, met with the involved elected officials and township folks, talked about the area. We agreed we're going to study it, try to come up with the best solution would be, as you said, regionally, not looking at it with just, I wear both hats, so it's easier for me to say, hey, I'm going to look at both. And that's the way we should do it. I mean, the public doesn't want us to look at this as two independent corridors. They're public roads and transportation in Pennsylvania.
I've also read that that most of the Turnpike tolls are actually collected in the Philadelphia region.
Yeah, about 40% of them, I think, are collected in the Philadelphia region. Oh, absolutely. For the whole system, absolutely. And it's because
it's just an important component of our morning commute, our transportation, and everything else.
And if we can make it more efficient by connecting it better to our system, we should do that. And using all electronic tolling versus cash lanes makes it a lot less expensive to do so. That's why we're moving towards all electronic tolling.
Right, I agree with that. Now, we just have about a minute left. I visited PennDOT, maybe a year ago now, and saw this machine that opens envelopes and sends checks to the bank and forms somewhere else. How's that working?
Oh, it's great. That's our Eagle, we call it, and it's a machine that automatically sorts, scans, and deposits checks. And we've actually used that machine to offer at the DCNR for their titling of their snowmobiles, ATVs, things like that, to the Fish and Boat Commission for fish, because it reduces their cost. So we're saving taxpayer dollars for other agencies using a piece of automated equipment that's really efficient.
So I guess the long and short of it is the new transportation package gives you more money to work with, and you're going to be using it as efficiently as that machine at your office, huh?
Go to Modern PennDOT, go to our website, click on Modern PennDOT. You'll see everything we're doing to reduce our costs and change business practices, deliver more no matter how much money we have. Any business would do it, so are we.
That's great. Well, that's all the time we have for today's program. I'm State Representative Kate Harper. If you need assistance with any state government matter, feel free to contact me at my local office. The address and phone number will be shown in just a moment. Thanks for watching. Please join me again next time for Legislative Report, and thank you, Secretary Schoch, for coming in today. Appreciate talking to you.
Thanks for having me.